Alright, well, yet another Descendents album review from me. I've reviewed every album to date, besides the most recent album, which released about 3 years ago, Hypercaffium Spazzinate, which I did listen pretty close to when it came out. Around this time, this was like a couple of years after I started to get into the Descendents and when I even discovered them. This album was kind of a really surprising thing for me to happen, since I thought the band was pretty much done, since their last album was 12 years ago. Cool to Be You is their last album. That was released in 2004 on Fat Records, and that was 12 years ago, so I thought the band was pretty much done. So this was a really surprising release for me. It was surprising for me to see the band come back together after like 12 years, after their second hiatus, which this one is definitely a lot longer than the last one. But this album, it came back with 16 new tracks in total and a few bonus tracks added in there, which I will talk about those as well in this. First of all, some of the riffs in this sound like some of the earlier albums in a way. Not all of them, but some of them do kind of sound sort of like the earlier records, like Milo Goes to College. And many songs in this album are short, unlike the previous two albums. Cool to Be You had not a lot of short songs on it at all. Most of them were around 3 minutes actually, but this album has a lot of short songs on it, like No Fat Burger, and a lot of the songs in general are like around a minute to minute and a half, or even less than that. The shortest song on this album, I believe, is around 50 seconds, and Descendents has been known for making short songs a lot, but recently they've come back with them compared to previous years, which they started making more songs, which kind of fit their more mature sound in the Cool to Be You album, which is definitely the most mature album they've made for sure. There's a couple of songs that kind of play around in this, like No Fat Burger kind of plays around a little bit. There isn't as much as like I Don't Want to Grow Up or Milo Goes to College, or especially Cheer, which is literally an album with an album cover of a piece of toilet paper. So songs I like on this album, On Paper is my favorite song on this album. It talks about really doing good as a paying your bills, doing good in high school, you know, but not being the most really popular kid in school, but still doing well in classes, really doing good throughout life, while not really having a lot of people really judging you for this and that, you know, the little reasons. There are some good guitar parts in this album, I will admit. I do like the fact that they use a little bit of lead a bit more than previous albums. I'd also like to add some of the songs on this album are a bit cheesy, I will admit. The song Smile and the song Without Love are probably the cheesiest songs in this album. The song Smile, literally the chorus, is What I Wouldn't Give to See You Smile, which is just really kind of generic in general, really predictable, which is why this is probably my least favorite song in the album. Shameless Halo is another song as well that I can't really stand the chorus from that much. And Without Love, I've listened to it quite a few times. It's grown on me on and off. The song, I will admit, is a bit cheesy as well. It was, of course, the lead single off this album. Definitely was a bit cheesy. It sort of sounds like the Bouncing Souls with their most recent single from this time, and I must say their single was a bit better than this one. It's too bad they didn't put out a full album with it, because this song kind of is a bit cheesy for sure, and really predictable kind of song in a way. That song's grown on me on and off, really. And the song No Fat Burger, which I talked about before, it kind of reminds me of Coffee Mug musically, and really kind of the message in a way, you know. It kind of reminds me of Coffee Mug, which is another short song they have, which is I think literally only around like 30 seconds. But this one kind of reminds me of that. There's songs in this album that are just really lyrically generic and weren't really thought out that much, I don't think, compared to their previous albums. Though I do still think they have lyrical talent for sure. I think it's kind of decayed slightly over the past years. That kind of shows with songs like Smile. It's pretty lyrically generic, not really that unpredictable. They could have made a lot of the choruses in this album, well, some of them anyway, a bit better than what they were. I think a lot of the choruses kind of were more disappointing. They could have been a little bit more melodic, I will admit, and they could have been a bit more unpredictable. I think they could have been that. A lot of the songs in this album remind me of recent Bouncing Souls material. I feel like if they've listened to a lot of their stuff, or just, you know, followed them a lot from recently, or, you know, just toured with them, or whatever it may be, it just sounds a lot like recent Bouncing Souls material, you know, like over the past, I'd say probably around 10 years. It sounds like a lot of Bouncing Souls material, which I kind of like the most recent Bouncing Souls material a little bit better, to be honest, because I feel like they are making a sound that's more unpredictable. They've added more variety of things into their sound over the years, so I feel like their most recent stuff is a bit more listenable than this, and I feel like it's less generic than a lot of the stuff on this album. Song Limiter, the bass in the beginning of this especially, the whole song kind of reminds me of My Age, but the beginning of the song, the bass part kind of reminds me of My Age. The way it started off the album, which of course the song doesn't start out the album, but just the beginning bass intro reminds me so much of My Age. Some songs are more generic than others. It definitely does have some good songs on it, but some, like I said, are pretty generic. And Fighting Myself is also a good song as well. I feel like it was really well structured, and this is a song that definitely was one of my favorite ones in the album. The song had a very good structure, instrumentation wise and lyric wise. Pretty much an all-around together good song. And the song Human Being kind of goes back to the old material a bit, like Often Milo Goes to College. It kind of goes back to those days. The bass in this album is definitely pretty stellar, I think. I think most of the bass parts in this are pretty stellar. Descendents in general have always had a pretty stellar bass sound, and I think they really stuck to that in this album. And Beyond the Music, I think it was a great closer for sure, which talks about, you know, kind of being grateful, I think, for really what you've gotten throughout your musical career. So I thought this was definitely a good closing for the album. And this may be the last Descendents album since, of course, you know, they're getting old. Most of them are in their 60s now. And of course, you know, they've had many hiatuses over the years, so I think this may be their last album. So putting that as the last song on the album, I think definitely was a good choice. Now I'm going to talk about the bonus tracks in this album. Most of the bonus tracks kind of sound like the songs that are on the album. They sound pretty much just almost like them production-wise, sound a lot like them instrumentation-wise. They pretty much, almost all of them, sound like the songs that were on the album. So these weren't really anything too special, I don't think. I mean, I think Unchanged was probably my favorite one of this album since it kind of differed the most from the rest of them as of instrumentation. Business as Usual, kind of meh song. I think they just pretty much kind of sounded like regular songs in the album. So like I said, I don't really think the bonus tracks are really much special. Overall, if you're kind of a more bigger punk fan, I think this album you'll enjoy more than people who don't listen to punk that much, or as much as the hardcore fans. But for people who aren't really hardcore fans of punk like I am, I feel like they will review this album a bit lower than what I will. I will say there were things I did dislike about this album, which is why I'm going to be rating it a bit lower than, you know, the past records. But some of the songs in this album are just a bit cheesy, you know, and generic. So that's mainly what's bringing down my score. I still enjoy this album for the most part. So this album I'm going to be giving a 3.4 out of 5. I'd say this is my least favorite Descendents record. I think it's even worse than Enjoy. I know it sounds kind of harsh, but, you know, I feel like this album was probably the most generic of all of Descendents releases, and that's why I'm ranking it that low. But still, it's a decent album, so we'll give it credit for what it deserves. And yeah, that is it for this review, and I will see you guys later.